India and the European Union have reached a broad understanding on how to address the EU's carbon tariff regime, easing out one of the most contentious issues in their newly concluded free trade agreement. From Jan 1st this year, the EU began implementing the world's first carbon tariff under the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, which imposes a levy on carbon-intensive imports such as steel, cement and aluminum. Now, to address its impact on Indian industries, both sides are now working towards a memorandum of understanding that will see the EU support India's decarbonization efforts through technology, technical assistance and funding. Official sources say the EU has committed around $500 million for the first 2 years to help Indian industries reduce their carbon footprint. A technical working group will also be set up to ensure transparency in how emissions are measured and how tariffs are calculated. Now, India has secured EU agreement to accredit Indian verifiers to audit carbon footprint, addressing cost and access concerns. New Delhi has also ensured that any flexibility granted by the EU to other countries under CBAM will automatically apply to India, while domestic carbon levies will be accounted for to avoid double taxation. Both sides have committed to fast-tracking the signing and ratification of the free trade agreement, which will cover nearly a quarter of global GDP. The deal will eliminate tariffs on 99% of Indian exports to the EU, benefiting sectors such as textile, apparel, leather, footwear and marine products, while European exporters stand to gain up to €4 billion annually, particularly in wine, automobiles, chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Meanwhile, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal hit back at the Congress on Wednesday over its criticism of the India-EU free trade agreement, calling the pact a win-win deal and not a zero-sum game. Responding to concerns flagged by Congress leader Jairam Ramesh on issues such as carbon tariffs, market access, as well as regulatory barriers, Goyal said decades of indecision had cost India jobs, income and growth. He argued that the agreement brings together complementary economies with combined GDP of $25 trillion and a market of 2 billion people. And India has made it clear that Turkey cannot route its exports to New Delhi by taking advantage of the India-EU free trade agreement. An official said on Wednesday that Turkish goods will not qualify for preferential access under the India-EU FTA, even after the pact is signed and implemented later this year. The clarification comes amid strained ties between India and Turkey, following Ankara's support for Pakistan and its criticism of India's strikes on terror camps in Pakistan under Operation Sindoor in May last year. Now, while India and the EU concluded negotiations for the landmark trade agreement this week, officials stressed that its benefits are strictly limited to participating members and cannot be extended indirectly to third countries. Trade data shows that India's exports to Turkey fell 14% to $5.71 billion in 2024-25, while imports declined over 20% to around $3 billion. Turkey accounts for just about 1.3% of India's total exports. And staying with trade deals, India is close to wrapping up negotiations for a free trade agreement with Chile that could boost access to critical minerals needed for key sectors such as electronics, automobiles and solar energy. According to an official, talks with the South American nation are in the final stages and are expected to pick up pace after the union budget. The agreement is likely to expand the existing preferential trade pact signed in 2006 into a comprehensive economic partnership covering areas such as digital services, investment cooperation, MSMEs, as well as critical minerals. While bilateral trade remains modest, India's exports to Chile slipped marginally to $1.15 billion in 2024-25, even as imports surged 72% to $2.6 billion. The official also said India's review of the goods trade agreement with the 10-nation ASEAN bloc is progressing and taking shape. In addition, New Delhi has begun preliminary scoping studies for a trade pact with the Mercosur bloc, which includes Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay, signing a broader push to deepen trade ties with Latin America. And a lot more news around free trade pacts, this time about Canada. And Canada has also expressed interest in fast-tracking the launch of negotiations for a free trade agreement with India, indicating a reset in bilateral trade ties. An official said that Canada's Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade and Economic Development, Maninder Sidhu, has invited Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal to visit Canada in the third week of next month. The two sides were earlier negotiating a trade pact, but talks were paused by Canada in 2023. Officials say both countries have now agreed to start afresh, citing major shifts in the global trade framework over the past 2 years. Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal has confirmed that India and Canada are finalizing the terms of reference to formally begin FTA negotiations, which will define the scope and framework of the proposed pact. Now, both sides have also appointed their chief negotiators. Trade data shows India's exports to Canada rose nearly 10% to $4.22 billion in 2024-25, while imports dipped slightly to $4.44 billion.